You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we are your hosts for this show, Head to Head, a Star Wars show. And you know, it's funny. Tonight's topic, this is really interesting. About a month ago, well, more than that, because this happened actually right before Andor came out. And we had this show that we were slated to do, which is basically ScreenRant.com had put this article out about what they thought anyway was the 12 most important lightsaber duels, I guess, in the franchise. Yeah. And it was like, all right, well, this might be kind of fun, because a lot of times, in addition to coming up with our own lists at times, you and I will sometimes find stuff on other sites or whatever, and go through well, what do they think, and debate it, and all that stuff, right? Well, so our intent at the time anyway was to actually do that with this. And then Andor just dropped, and I think some other thing happened too that made us preclude it, or maybe we couldn't go on live that week or whatever. But we thought, you know what? Andor's done. There's really not a whole lot going on right now in the world of Star Wars, which is, I mean, sure, you have more rumblings of, Filoni, and who's the other creative chick that she's like her and Filoni are kind of under Kathleen Kennedy. Filoni does the creative stuff, and she does like some of the other stuff. I can never remember her name.
Yeah.
But whoever she is, there's things swirling once again that they might become the co-heads of Lucasfilm, and so there's that whole thing going around. But I mean, let's face it, like, I think Kathleen Kennedy is going to be somewhat like Palpatine. She's going to like hang on to that empire,
right,
with her cold, dead little hands. Yeah. Ted Adam Green says Beck. Yeah, it's something like Kim Beck or somebody Beck. Yeah, that's who it is, though. I remember the last name. So, yes. But outside of that, I don't, you hear rumblings every once in a while like you usually do, right, with anything Star Wars related. So it's like, you know what? We're basically kicking off summer. This would be a good time to do maybe a more fun, relaxed show, right? Let's tear apart somebody else's ideas. Instead of going through our own thing, let's go through the Screen Rant thing and see, hey, who knows? Maybe they got it right. I'll be honest. Obviously, I put the graphics and everything together, but it's been long enough. I did not actually go back through this because I almost wanted this to hit me. This is not an excuse. I mean, this is not one of those. I didn't have time to do it, so I kind of like,
Dog ate my homework.
Just kind of, right, exactly. Just kind of come up with some crazy sounding thing or whatever. No, that's not what this is. I purposely did not do this because I wanted it to be fresh. Universal is obviously chatting with us, and he says, look, Dave Filoni is not taking over for Kathleen Kennedy. I know. There's no way. Like I said, what people have been saying is it's going to be a co-leading thing between him and that whatever Beck. Kathleen Kennedy is named a replacement. But I'm sorry, I take a lot of that with a grain of salt anyway, because I honestly don't think she's going anywhere for a while. Do I wish she would? Yeah. Do they need to? Because here's the thing. It's funny because, I forgot who it was. It was a Disney Insider. It was basically this whole article where they were talking about this. And the Insider basically said that, let's remember that Filoni is not the Andor guy. He's the Ahsoka guy. And leave it at that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And I mean,
True,
basically, yeah, that's it. The problem is, will Filoni get there? Undoubtedly. He's super talented. He's a creative, great storyteller, the whole shot. He definitely has that part. But as far as running a studio, he needs another 10 or 15 years with actual live movie experience under his belt. He needs to understand that intimately before he can run a studio. And even Kathleen Kennedy, and we've said this on I don't know how many shows we've done, not only on her, but just where she's been mentioned. She's mentioned in like every other show we do. And that is, we always say this, she's a brilliant producer. I mean, she's one of the best producers in Hollywood, like ever. But that does not mean you're going to be a good studio head. And that's proven to be the case. So that's really the only real rumblings. Now with this lightsaber thing, even though if you guys like, we don't care, we can mix the show up. I mean, if you want to talk about this Kathleen Kennedy thing, we can. But I'm just saying that's the only other thing that's in the news right now that's really, I think, of any value. But with this lightsaber thing, being that we haven't had a chance to do this, and obviously we had to shelve it, and now we're revisiting it, did you actually go through and look?
Briefly.
Okay.
Like, I just kind of just so I can familiarize myself. Someone get up here and like, who was that? You know,
well,
in case they slipped something in there.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. So now I'll rely on you if they do something like that. But even more importantly, the other thing that, I mean, obviously I want to make sure the transitions were working in the show tonight, but there is also the whole, you know, you don't want to really, you know, you don't want to stage it to where, you know, you're talking about whatever the current thing is and be like, and next we have, and then you have to actually see the graphic to know, because that comes across a little. But then again, it could also be somewhat spontaneous. All right. Universal is not letting go of this Kathleen Kennedy thing. Says, what I have heard is that Brennan is her replacement. Now, who is Brennan?
Who is Brennan? What did she do?
Yeah, who is Brennan?
Sounds like somebody from Beverly Hills 90210.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I think Ted was right. I think it's somebody back that's the other person that I'm thinking of. She was like put in charge of kind of like some of the business, like overseeing projects and stuff. And so she's sort of like Filoni's counterpart, where he's like the creative director and she's the, I don't know, like vice president of something or other. I remember when they made a really big deal about her a few years back, but I do not remember Carrie Beck. Yes, thank you, Ted. Carrie Beck. Well, what was her position? Like, I forgot what her official title was. I mean, sure, we can look it up, but what fun is that? You guys are doing the work. Got an audience of co-producers here. This is great. Okay, so Universal comes in. Oh, Daryl, we seem to have lost you. He says, let's see, she is the current GM of Lucasfilm and GM of Business. All right, well, that's interesting. So, I knew it was something like that. I knew it was something where, you know, it was some kind of crazy thing like that. Then Ted says, as executive producer as Lucas. Not sure what that is. You have to clarify that one for me, Ted. Hopefully we get Daryl back pretty soon. I don't know why he dropped off. The nice thing about it is that he's... there you are.
Yes, I had to deal with a feline problem.
Oh, my cats. Yes. Did they actually start going crazy?
They actually broke in here.
What?
Yeah. It was like...
The cats actually... Did they both break in?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I hope it's because the door wasn't fully latched and it wasn't like they figured out how to open it. Because I had a cat do that once where they actually figured out how to open the door. That's a scary thing. Well, Universal says... Ted's like, Ted can't type. Universal says, Carrie is in charge of EVP of live action. Yes, Executive Vice President of live action. Okay, that's... I knew it was something that was similar to like a counterpart to what Filoni was doing on the creative side. I just couldn't remember. It was like the business counterpart. So anyway, the rumor is that Even though I feel sorry for the people that are tuning in for this lightsaber thing and we're talking about this, but the rumor is that they're thinking of doing a co-thing. Now, of course, Universal is throwing a little wrench into this thing by saying that Brennan is general manager and president of Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm Business. Okay, so you're saying that this person might ultimately be the head. Well, that, I mean, again, not to get too far into the weeds on this, but this would make sense to me. Because the problem that I have when you start putting Filoni in the mix and some of these other people is like, okay, that may look good on paper. But again, what experience do you have running, a company? And it's more than just, again, like that Disney insider said, let's remember, Filoni is not the Andor guy. He's the Ahsoka guy. And what he actually meant by that was, and it's got to be, you got to wonder if Filoni isn't, somewhat, let's just say, simultaneously happy, but also bothered by the fact that Andor is getting just heaps of praise and all this other stuff. But the thing is, what they're worried about, and this is something that, again, this should probably be maybe even a topic of our next show next week, because one of the things that everybody is concerned where Filoni, I guess, where he fits into this whole thing, is that they think that he's going to cater to all the super fans, right? Like he's not going to cater enough to the hardcores. And I'm okay with that, actually. Like, I think that after so long, they need to start catering to some of the hardcore fans. On the other hand, you do have the argument that people have made where you have Tony Gilroy coming in, who's not, he wasn't really a fan and all that other stuff. And he's just like, look, if you tell really good stories and you put them in the Star Wars universe, they're going to do well. So, and it's not like Gilroy didn't put in some, like little fan Easter egg things himself. So there is that. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to say about this whole thing before we move on to the lightsabers? Because even Universal said, let's do lightsabers.
Yeah, right.
Universal is turning into Filoni right now. He just wants to do lightsabers.
Yeah, no, I think it's
think it's time to do the old lightsaber thing.
Yeah, let's hit the blades.
All right, so we'll hit the blade. So basically, what this is, again, just as a reminder to everybody, this is ScreenRant's list. They had come up with the 12 most important. I mean, we said 12 best, but really the article, if you read it, which we did link in the description, by the way, the article basically says the 12 most important duels in the franchise. And so what we thought might be fun is, hey, let's look at this list. Let's talk about it. There might be things on here that you're like, what? Why is this on here? And why isn't that on here? But more importantly, you might look at some of these and go, well, wait, this should be higher than this. So with that, I think we can start with number 12. Let's do this. Number 12, Darth Maul versus Ahsoka Tano, the Siege of Mandalore. I remember this. I actually thought that this was one of the cooler duels, actually, and something that was kind of a really unique thing, because if you think about it, both of them are more or less like really advanced Padawans at this point. I mean, you can make the argument that Maul's pretty much a full-blown Sith Lord, and Ahsoka's pretty much a full-blown Jedi at this point, but, they're both apprentices, essentially.
Yeah. So
I see.
I was kind of pausing because of
I see.
DJ's,
I know the cats. Man, they're just like going crazy out there.
But I'm going to say that I think this is a very important duel, just because of, as you aforementioned, that you have two people who are pretty much apprentices of the most powerful Sith Lords eventually, that you will run across, right? Because you have Maul, who's been the apprentice of Palpatine, but then you also have Ahsoka, who's the apprentice of Anakin.
You're doing pretty good.
Who eventually becomes Vader.
You're doing pretty good, actually, saying all this stuff with those cats scratching like that.
I've been enough, loud DJ places.
Well, not to mention, yeah, you have brothers and sisters, so
that's true.
there is that.
But yeah, so I think this was a really cool duel just because, not only because of the actual fighting, which was really awesome, you know, if you really watch it for what it was, but then I think you also have to listen to the dialogue and the things that they're saying to each other.
Yes.
Because I think that's what makes it so impactful is because Maul is still trying to figure out like the whole plan because he already realized he's been duped by Palpatine and he's kind of been a cast aside. So he's trying to figure out like what's his big plan, what's his ultimate goal, and he starts to realize it's her master that he wants, and that's where you know a lot of the tension starts to build within this duel, and that's the thing about lightsaber duels. You know, a lot of people like the flashiness, the action, and don't get me wrong, I do as well. But if it lacks conviction or if it lacks meaning, it's just kind of like a cool special effect that you saw that has no purpose. And I think that's what makes some of these lightsaber duels really stand out, not only because of the actual fighting itself, but what they're fighting for.
Oh, hands down. I mean, we've actually said this because we've ranked lightsaber duels before, like our own lists, and we've we've talked about this occasionally, even when we've been talking about other projects or whatever. You know, we'll bring up the duels because invariably, except for Andor, there's always a lightsaber duel or two. And we've even stated the original trilogy still has the best duels, and it's not because, obviously, of the fighting. Because if you're looking at the prettiness and all that of the fighting, obviously that's going to go to something like the prequels or maybe even some of the, the shows. But it's like what you said. It's the emotional weight and the content and the dialogue and the pacing. Those are the things that really make those duels stand out. That's expert storytelling right there. And that's something that you have to look at, not just... And that's why I like the fact that Screen Rant put most important. They didn't necessarily say best. You know, they didn't...
Or coolest or,
Right, or anything like that, And you get these people, like, in the weeds, like, oh, I think he's using Form 6 on that. I mean, it's like, okay, whatever. That's the point where I'm kind of like... And again, we did actually do a whole show. It was probably one of my most elaborate PowerPoints or whatever I was using. I think I used Canva.
That's one of my elaborate explanations of some of this stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, we actually went in and we went through all the lightsaber combat forms, and it's on our channel. Maybe I'll actually link it in the comments of this one once the show's done, because it's a really good companion piece to this, actually. But that's where we get into the weeds a little bit with, this is Form 2 mixed with Forms 5, and that kind of thing. So, but that's not what this is about. This is about the importance to the story, the importance to the characters. Pretty much like, well, how is this moving things forward, both from a story and a character perspective? And I think that leads nicely into our number 11. Our number 11 is Anakin versus Ahsoka, World Between Worlds, which actually was one of the things that was really cool about the Ahsoka series.
Yeah, truly. I really like this one. I think this is kind of you can call it a duel but again, I think it's more of, I don't want to say like a what if, but it's kind of cool because it's kind of a continuation from the actual real duel that they had.
The Vader versus Ahsoka?
Yeah, Vader versus Ahsoka in Rebels. And this was very, once again, poignant because it's Ahsoka dealing with her loss of Anakin.
Yeah.
And just did, like you just said, Eric, the weight and the gravity of the emotions of, you were my master. I loved you. How could you do this? How could you... how couldn't I see this? And just there's so many emotions that Ahsoka had and so much guilt that she was dealing with.
Yeah.
And dealing with, because she felt like, man, if I would have been there, maybe he wouldn't have turned and maybe none of this would have happened and all of that. So that's and she didn't even want to fight him, and he pressed combat, and she had to really kind of defend herself. And this is not like the same master that she had before. He's now blending light and dark with her.
Yeah, I love the fact that they did that. That they actually, even during this is actually probably one of my favorite moments of the whole Ahsoka series, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I like the fact that they were, and not just because it was live action, because this is the first time that you saw some of the Clone Wars, like things from the series, but in live action.
Right.
When, he would, like, they would go back into certain battles and he would use those moments to teach or, whatever. And, some of that stuff. But some of the other things were, yeah, he was kind of talking as like Vader in a sense, like, almost. I mean, obviously, this is after the redemption point, so he is a redeemed Anakin, but he still maintains the knowledge, of the dark side and a lot of the skills that he had for that. And yeah, I just thought this actually really made me excited for a post Return of the Jedi Anakin appearance. Like, it was something that I was kind of like, I don't really know if this could be kind of cheesy, but actually it worked really well, I thought.
Also, man, kudos to the production team on this, because man, that whole thing when Anakin was marching towards it, and he kept like shapeshifting between Anakin and Vader.
Oh yeah,
that was it was
awesome.
chilling in a way. Like,
it was.
Yo, like it's like the man versus the suit, and once again, she's having to understand the balance between light and dark. And I think that's ultimately what Anakin was trying to show her, was this like,
well, that and how to deal with loss. Because remember, the whole thing, this is actually a Sabine show,
right?
For the first like half the season,
for the first 3 episodes, right?
Yeah, but it was trying to snap her out of this funk that she was in and dealing with loss and dealing with some of the things, almost kind of like what Luke had to do, It's like dealing with failures and things like that. And he was trying to bring that back. And then, yeah, also show her a little bit of a balance. But another point that I want to make about this one, you said kudos to the production team, rightly so, for how they handled that Vader Anakin switch. I also want to give kudos to them for giving us a live action version of the World Between Worlds that looked pretty dead on to the Rebels version,
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, that was spectacular, I thought. All right, we won't belabor this. Oh, and look, what a nice segue that is. Yeah, look at Screen Rant. I wonder if they did this on purpose, because you could argue that this is, well, technically, number 11 would be a continuation of 10, right? Because this happened chronologically. This happened first,
right?
So this is an interesting thing to me too, because again, this is one of those no-brainers. It almost doesn't even need to be explained, right? But you do have people out there that really don't understand. This is, again, master and apprentice, but a very different master.
Yeah.
Also a very different apprentice, really. But, Ahsoka has to deal with the fact that she is now fighting an evil version of her own master. And that just has to be an unbelievably crazy thing to face, if you really stop and think of the emotion behind all this.
Yeah, I mean, that again, watching the byplay between and listening to the byplay between these two, because even if you go early in the season, when she first discovers that that's Anakin, they're doing that whole because they discovered this while they were like in this whole space battle.
Yep.
And she could sense the Force in him, and he and her, and then it felt familiar. And then he makes the statements like, "The Padawan lives." And then she's like, "Anakin?" Like, and that was just like a whole moment in and of itself. And I never would have thought that they would have showed Anakin versus Vader. I mean, not Anakin, but Ahsoka versus Vader.
That would be cool too.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Like one of those little, like, here comes my Star Trek reference, that whole like good Kirk, evil Kirk battle that.
Right. But I thought this was really cool because in some ways it kind of gave her some closure because she had to accept the fact that
Hmm.
this is her master now. Like he's not almost like the whole Obi-Wan thing. Like, the man who was once your father, was destroyed, and pretty much this is all that remains. And like you said, to be able to have to come to grips with that and to actually now have to and they know each other they know each other so well that much like the whole Anakin and Obi-Wan situation. And he didn't want to kill her. He's like, look, just
Yes.
move out of the way. I'll just forget about all this and we can just, you know, but they duel it out. It was a really good duel. And then she got some shots in on Vader.
Oh
But
yeah.
then,
I mean, like I said, I
at
mean,
the
she's
end,
definitely like pretty because again, this is happening during Rebels Ahsoka, right? And we think Rebels
hmm
Ahsoka is like around 40 or something. So she's like since they last saw each other, presumably at the end of, season 7,
Clone
right?
Wars, right?
Yeah. That's gonna be basically like, okay, we're overlapping episode 3 at this point. So this is the last time they had seen each other. So, like 10, 15 years had passed or something.
hmm
Probably like, well, maybe 8 years. Because Rebels takes place a little bit before like Rogue One. But, it's one of those things that you look at this and you go, okay, yeah, this is what we look for. Not only was it spectacular, but it also had a lot of weight to it. Now, it's funny because, I was about to make the point about Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And remember now, excuse me, there's a couple of different battles. Screen Rant at number 9 has the Obi-Wan series, which was interesting because, and I can make the same point because you kept pointing out how the Ahsoka Vader thing, in a way, was a lot like the Obi-Wan Vader thing, which it is,
Yeah.
except I think the Ahsoka Vader thing would be a little bit more heartbreaking for Ahsoka than it would be for Obi-Wan, but for different reasons. Because with Obi-Wan, what separates it a little bit was it was beyond just like a master, student thing. It was more like a father son or older brother, younger brother. Like
hmm
there was more than just the master apprentice thing.
Sure.
But I think the reason why I give a little bit of the edge, and of course anybody watching this, whether they're watching it live or after the fact, can weigh in on this, and I hope you do, is that with Ahsoka, I think it's worse because it's like the person, when you have a Jedi master, they're responsible for, they're shaping how you think. Because remember, they're like
hmm
little kids when they get them, right? And then when they're assigned
Yeah.
a master, they're like preteens or something. And so you come to view this as like a father mother figure. These are the people who shape you, like a
Yeah.
mentor. Imagine if you had a mentor that suddenly just turned like completely evil, and it's just, I mean, that would be
Yeah.
so heartbreaking.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, that's what makes it um very, I guess, convoluted as far as your emotions because, you know, and even to your point, Eric, with the Obi-Wan and Vader aspect, not only were they like brothers, but the other thing is that he knew who Anakin was supposed to be.
Well, that,
Just
yeah,
this
there
whole
is that
prophecy
too, right?
thing
Yeah.
that he was, and then on top of that, Obi-Wan also has the guilt from like, okay, you're supposed to be Qui-Gon's Padawan, technically. And I picked up for him because he died. So there's another sense of failure that comes along with that too. It's like, not only do I feel like I failed Anakin, but I failed Qui-Gon too. So there's a whole host of
So I wonder if he ever
emotions.
brought that up to Yoda. Like, well, technically he was supposed to be Qui-Gon. Like, I didn't have anything to do with this,
Right,
man.
like,
This
look,
is
I
thrown
wanted to
on
leave the
me.
kid on.
Right. I voted for leaving him on the island, as it were,
Yeah,
right?
leave him in the desert. Let him
Qui-Gon's the one
fly
that
his little
pushed it.
pods.
So really, I think that he needs to appear as a Force ghost and take a little bit of responsibility for this.
Right.
But it should also be noted, and I don't remember what the actual article said, because again, I purposely didn't read the articles. Well, I should say reread. I read it when we initially put the show together, but when we decided to resurrect it, I decided not to really reread the article part because I wanted this thing to hit me, just like pure, like kind of how it's going to hit everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I linked the article, by the way, in the description. So if you guys want to check it out and, read some of Screen Rant's reasonings behind some of this stuff, go for it. Link is in the description. But I think it should be noted that this is probably, I hope it's from the second duel in the series and not the first one. Because the first one, I remember seeing the first one. And remember, this is only like a 6-episode series, right? And I think the first one happens in like episode like 3 or something, 2 or whatever. It's like it's far enough along in the series that you're kind of like, wow, really? This is it?
Is it?
This is the big, like, man, They might as well just left this alone and just let us go from like episode 3 to 4,
Yeah,
because I remember
to see this.
Yeah, and that was one of your big criticisms. I remember when they were talking about making a trilogy. You're like, okay, look, man, I don't know if I really need to see the adventures of Obi-Wan and the moisture farm. I just
before I knew he was a space butcher or something.
Right. Well, yeah, that this thing reveals. I had always been on board for an Obi-Wan movie because I had seen some comic versions of it that I thought, okay, there's a lot of story there. But where we both agreed was we were both skeptical about, are they actually going to try to have Vader and Obi-Wan meet up? Because that was the concern. And of course, I remember the big thing about that, and this was huge. That whole line, well, like, you should not have come back, or, no, it was like, when you should not have come back, and there was like one other line or something from episode 4 that seemed to indicate that there was a battle. Or like when he said he's more machine now than man.
Twisted and evil.
Yeah, because it was kind of like, well, all right, man, he didn't really...
How do you know?
Yeah, he didn't really know that. And there would be no way that he would have known that Vader was Anakin unless that was revealed to him somehow. Now, granted, there is the whole lines in episode 3 where it's like, you henceforth, you will be Darth Vader. It's like, okay, 2 and 2, right? But there was enough wiggle room for the producers and everything to come up with something where they could say, hey, look, there is a battle. But I remember not expecting 2. So I'm thinking, after that first one, I'm like, ooh, that's it, huh?
Right, exactly.
So I was really happy to see that, yes, we did in fact get
performance.
Yes, a second battle at the end of that show, because it's like, no, man, you can't really. There's already enough problems with this show. There was a lot of good in it, don't get me wrong, but there's enough problems where it's like, okay, Filoni is not only the Ahsoka guy, he's the Obi-Wan guy too. But I think that, yes, that second duel, that's the one that has a lot of that emotional weight to it, because if you look at it, it was a lot longer. I still hate the fact that it just looks like it's like the laziest volume production I've ever seen. It just looks like they just run an empty warehouse with like some sand thrown on it. I'm like, what? I don't even know what this is. But it's like, all right, whatever. You know what? Let's just go on to the next one. I don't know. You got anything you wanted to add to the Obi-Wan series?
No, that's pretty much it.
Good. All right.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So number 8. So number 8, we got the Dooku and versus Anakin and Obi-Wan from basically episode 3. And this was actually a really cool one too. Again, one of the things that I like about this list already is they're not just showing us the really super pretty lightsaber duels. They're giving us a lot of the ones that really have weight. And I think that the key that they put on here was most important. And if they're just flashy, that doesn't necessarily mean they're important.
Right.
They could be both. But
Yeah, sure.
but this one, I think, is the first time, and again, this is where you see Anakin get a little bit tempted by the dark side, even though he didn't. I mean, Dooku even made a point like, hey, you have these feelings, but you're not using them. What's up with that?
Yeah.
So it's like the seed's been planted. Like, Anakin has these feelings, and Palpatine knows that. He's trying to,
Poke
unleash.
it out of him.
Right. But the thing that I thought was really cool about this is the fact that this is kind of like that flip side from the duel of episode 2. It's like, okay, Dooku, I'm a lot more powerful than I was,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see the growth in Anakin as far as his skills and abilities as a as a duelist. Um, you actually see again Obi-Wan get dispatched relatively quickly. Um,
once
but
again, that poor
once
guy
again, right?
barely lasted. I mean, except for the Grievous thing. It's like in
Right.
episode 2, he was vanquished fairly, not as fast as this.
Right.
This, he was barely even a participant. It's almost like, is it really
Right.
Count Dooku versus Anakin and Obi-Wan? Kind of,
Right.
maybe,
Exactly.
for the first 30 seconds.
But I think what this really showed was, like you said, just the seeds of the dark side being planted in by Dooku. Um, Even the growth, though, of Anakin a little bit, because not just in power, but in wisdom.
Yeah.
Because he makes the statement again, like, we're gonna take them together this time. I was about to say that, like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was said jokingly, but it was kind of like Anakin has learned this lesson. Like, all right, I can't just,
Well, losing a couple limbs will do that to you.
yeah, exactly. So that was cool. But then also, the moment where you start to see his descent is also as a part of this. Is now when Anakin beats Dooku. He has both blades, and Palpatine's like, do it. And he's like, no, I shouldn't. He's struggling. And his mentor, nah, get rid of him. So he does it. So it's just it's a powerful thing. It's an important thing because this is where you start to see the growth of Anakin as a combatant. He's gotten wiser, but he's also starting to succumb to his emotions.
This brings up a good point, and this is something I never really thought of until just now. When you go to the end of the movie, right,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the Mace Windu thing, and he just keeps hammering on Windu, like, no, man, we got to take him in. We got to face justice. Surprised this never occurred to me before now. I wonder if that's because he was thinking back to when he killed Dooku. Like, I should not have done this. Like, that was wrong. Like, I feel really bad about this. Because I remember...
No, it was selfish.
Well, kind of. But, I mean, yes, there was a selfish motivation of the whole Padme, like, hey, But I do remember reading in some of the comics, in particular, like the Darth Vader series, that he was like kind of flashing back, and he was never fully comfortable with that decision. And remember, the other problem was that's why he kept saying the Jedi were evil, right? Was because he's like, look, according to our code and what we believe, this is what we're supposed to do.
Right.
Now you're all like going, well, I mean, granted, they kind of had a point. It's like, well, yeah, but, this is like a Sith Lord who's basically maneuvered himself to be in charge of the whole galaxy.
Yeah.
Maybe we make an exception this time.
Exactly.
He's too powerful to be left alive, right? I mean, man had a point.
Yeah, true. Also, I think it's more so just Anakin's selfishness is because for two reasons. One, that you already mentioned, Padme. But two is like, he still loves Palpatine because that's still his mentor. So there's probably still a soft spot he still has for him.
Well, yes and no,
And
because if
doesn't
you
want
remember, he was ready to kill him.
No, he was ready to take him in.
Well, still.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he was ready to arrest him. He wasn't ready to kill him, though.
He probably would have if Palpatine had gone against him. Because, I mean, the thing is that if you really rewatch that scene, I only know because I saw it not too long ago. That's why it's fresh in my mind. He was like, you're right. I mean, he was definitely going to take him in, but he wasn't playing. And it was funny because when you actually, this is why it was brilliantly acted by Ian McDiarmid. When you look at the way he played the scene, he played it where Palpatine, he felt mildly anxious. Because you can hear sort of like, okay, I've got to get this under control like real quick before this kid does something that like ruins my whole plan. I mean, he was probably still fairly certain he could take out Anakin, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, if he had his whole plan, you know, where's he going to find another apprentice?
Right.
I mean, he doesn't know about Luke yet, right? So, I mean, there is that. But this is what I mean by when I talk about the fact that, you know, people dismiss the Star Wars saga as like this kind of lighthearted kid story or whatever. You know, and that's why they praise Andor so much, which, you know, it's legitimate, right? It's moving in a little bit more adult themes and territories and stuff. But there's a lot of complexity in the saga, like what we're just talking about. And in fact, this is like a really good segue, because number 7 happens to be the Mace Windu versus Emperor Palpatine battle, which was awesome. This is actually one of my favorite duels of the whole saga.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love this one. I love how they all kind of like marched into this office and, you know, by the power of Grayskull and Galactic Republic, you know, that was that was cool.
Well, what was funny was at first, because, you know, Palpatine's like, yeah, I've squashed out. Like, he started to give some, like, little report or something.
Yeah. Yo. You know, Master Windu, General Grievous, I just received word that General Grievous has been vanquished on Utapau, so we can, you know. And Mace is like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think that was his last little, you know, hey, maybe I can fool these guys and buy myself a little bit more time. Yeah, that whole scene was just, you know, it's treason then, and he does that little tornado thing.
Man, that was
instantly
sweet.
Vanquishes like half of those guys.
Well, the fact that he had like literally something up his sleeve was hilarious.
Oh, I know. Well, you always wondered, like, did this guy? I mean, you had to have a lightsaber,
right?
Even though, I mean, he was like so powerful, he really didn't need it. But it was also cool to see his lightsaber too, because I had always wondered, what is his lightsaber hilt going to be like?
Exactly.
And, you know,
what's his fighting style and
sure,
you know, all of that.
And
we got that, and that was a cool thing, just watching those two actually go at each other. And there wasn't, you know, it wasn't really talking because, you know, it wasn't even necessary because we all knew why we were here, you know.
Well, this is a good example of it being emotionally heavy, but not having to have dialogue to support that.
Yeah, because, you know, it's when they show up, you know, and it's, you gotta think about it too. Is the Mace was putting a whole lot of faith in Anakin.
Yeah,
because he's like, "Are you sure?" Because you do. I mean, that's just like going up to the president of the United States. It's like, all right, if you're saying that he's doing this, I'm gonna walk in here, and I'm just going guns a blazing, pretty much. You better be right about this, you know, because my career. If I'm wrong, yeah, the Jedi look completely terrible, and that's kind of what happens in the midst of it, because now basically, you know, Palpatine called it an assassination attempt. It left him disfigured and disformed and all this stuff. And so that's kind of sets up his ability to now take over as Emperor.
Yeah, which actually is a good discussion point too, because he could have played this one of two ways. He could have just played the kindly, you know, what are you talking about? I'm not a what, Lord? You know, that kind of thing, right? And he could have probably sold that because they already had a somewhat of a distrust of Anakin anyway. I mean, he could have possibly have tried to turn that around, but he chose not to. Because he must have just sensed like, okay, might as well just put it all out there and do this, because obviously any doubt was erased after he busted out a red lightsaber and sliced up half the Jedi that were with Mace, you know. I was like, oh, okay, I guess Anakin was telling the truth.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like, you know, he's facing him going, all right, but to be clear, you are a Sith Lord, though, right? I mean, so that is an interesting thing. Like, he could have done the other thing, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to use this. And again, he was really taking a lot. I mean, we had said that all the time, even the Clone Wars, right? Because you watch the whole Clone Wars thing, and it's like, man, okay, granted, brilliant strategist, all this stuff. Yeah, you're this great politician, whatever. But there's a lot of things, a lot of variables that have to just fall perfectly in order for this plan to work. Now, I will give him credit. Anytime something did go wrong, like when he lost Maul or whatever, you know, he was able to pretty much pivot and shift the plan a little bit and, you know, make it work, I guess. So there is that, but I don't know. I just think that there's a lot. Like, man, you're really riding on a lot of variables here to go your way.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So with that, what do we got next? We've got the famous Darth Maul versus Qui-Gon Obi-Wan battle. Probably the first, well, technically, there was the Qui-Gon Darth Maul one in the sand.
On Tatooine, right?
Yeah, on Tatooine. So there's that. But this is kind of like the first epic battle of the prequels that we see. And yeah, this was the battle that showed us, like, oh, okay, there's a whole new thing. You know, we're going back to the Jedi, and maybe you can make the argument that the Old Republic was more their prime, but this is probably like the end of their prime.
Yeah, I will say the High Republic is probably,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Well, it
that.
depends. They have to canonize certain aspects. I mean, they did canonize Revan and things like some of the Knights of the Old Republic stuff, but it really depends, because if you look at the true zenith of the Jedi was during, you know, just remember, you're talking like thousands upon
10,000
thousands of years,
Yeah.
that the Old Republic existed, and that was like their true zenith. And then they kind of, I don't know, they went down, and then the High Republic era came, and that was, I mean, I guess you can argue that's the Golden Age or something. I mean, I don't know, it's kind of tough. The High Republic thing was always kind of a weird, you know, they just sort of dropped that on us. And
I think the High Republic's more than just the foundation.
well, I think the High Republic is standing in for a more recent version of the Old Republic, because remember, they have not technically
True.
really canonized a lot of the EU Old Republic stuff. You know, you have some things here and there, but it's not as fleshed out as it was before in the new canon I'm talking about. And I think the High Republic might maybe be like kind of a, you know, instead of making it like 10,000 years before Episode 1, I think they wanted to make it a little bit closer.
Yeah. I mean, I think even in this, though, like with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan going
I
against
guess
Maul.
we should talk about the duel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the importance. I guess you could say the importance in it comes at the end,
Yeah.
because you lose Qui-Gon. And
Right.
now,
That's it. You just hit the nail completely on the head.
yeah, because it's like without Qui-Gon, now Obi-Wan has to pick up the mantle
Yep.
of training Anakin. And that kind of sets the new story in motion. And without that, you know, we don't know if we get a Vader.
Right. Well, there's two things. That's one. I think the other importance that it had, well, okay, two. So three things total. What you just said about losing Qui-Gon, and that's the catalyst for Obi-Wan then to take on Anakin, is, you know, kind of getting Qui-Gon out of the way. Second thing is it's the announcement essentially of the return of the Sith, right? So that's a big important thing.
See,
Kind of puts the Sith out there.
That always confused me, because technically, what made it different from when they were on Tatooine? Because at Tatooine, they gave the report and said, like, look, yeah, we encountered.
Yeah, they did, but I mean, I think that this is like more cementing that, right? Like now, it wasn't just some sort of casual encounter. right? It wasn't some sort of almost like bounty hunting type situation. I mean, this is really like, hey, these guys are up to something, like something huge. Because it was
Yeah, almost
after
like,
this.
why would he be there? Because it's like,
Right.
okay, on
Exactly.
Tatooine, you could, that's a place of scum and villainy anyway.
Yep.
So you could possibly run into a dark side user. Are we sure it's a Sith Lord? That type of thing. But because they did say, oh, he was trained in the Jedi arts, and
Right.
but the
after
fact that
when you
he
notice,
shows up in the middle of
Mhm.
this war, and you're like, okay, what are you doing here again? Like the first time, coincidence. Second time, yeah, you're here on purpose.
Well, and not only that, but see, that's when the conversation started to shift. Like, all right, man, is this guy the master or the
Master or the
apprentice?
apprentice?
Well, which
Yep.
one is he?
Exactly.
Now we got to figure this out. So I think this is the
Mhm.
catalyst for that. And then I also think that this is obviously the other importance is that, well, at the time when we all thought Maul was dead, before he ended up in like almost as many projects as C3PO, this is when Obi-Wan transitions from Padawan to Knight, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. It's not so much the duel itself. It's like what comes out of it. I think that's the difference.
Gotcha.
It's not just the emotion surrounding it. Because, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, there's really not a lot at stake other than the fact that they're trying to prevent this guy from doing whatever he was going to do to thwart their plan. All they're trying to do is, like, neutralize some ship, ultimately, that ends up in a space battle anyway. And of
Mhm.
course, maybe keeping the queen safe, but there's really not a whole lot of emotional thing with the duel itself. It's really more what's coming out of that and what's coming out of the result of the duel, I think, that makes it
Yeah.
important. All right, so with that, we can go to our number 5. Of course, yes, a classic, right? Vader
Top
versus Luke.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, good old Cloud City. This is like the very first one that, well, no, the Obi-Wan Vader of 4 had a lot of weight and emotion too. But I remember ever since then, before this came out, it was funny because after the Obi-Wan Vader thing, after, we had all seen episode 4 back then in like 1977, we were just like, oh man, imagine like a Vader versus Luke. What would that be like? And then to actually get that in the next film was just like, because we even thought the whole scene in the cave, we thought that's all we were going to get. Like, even during, like, watching The Empire Strikes Back for the first time theatrically,
I know that had to freak you guys out too. When you saw that scene.
Yeah, it did.
Because I remember as a kid, I remember thinking that was real. Like it wasn't like a dream or a vision or something.
And that was basically it. I mean, obviously, when the helmet explodes and you see Luke's face, you're kind of like, all right, I'm thinking this might be a vision of some sort, but we actually thought, I remember comparing notes with a lot of my friends after we had all seen it. It's like we all thought that was just going to be the little fan service. Okay, there's your Luke versus Vader duel. But then when we saw it at the end, and then of course, just, it was as emotional, I think, as the Return of the Jedi version, but just for different reasons.
Now, I would say for this duel, this is where you see the growth of Luke. You see him, okay, he's gotten some things down. We saw earlier when he's able to pull the lightsaber to his hand out of the snow, okay, but we haven't seen him fight.
Right.
And
That's
this
true.
was cool because he did the force jump. He did, he was calling the lightsaber to his hand. He didn't seem to really operate too much out of fear. He kind of walked up on Vader out the gate anyway. I mean, so it was really like the maturation. You start to really see the maturation of Luke, where he goes from that little whiny, what's that flashing, to like, you'll find out I'm full of surprises. It's like, okay.
Well,
You
yeah,
got
but that's a
that-
good point because, see, the true maturation of Luke happens in Return of the Jedi.
Sure, yeah, that's when you see it come to his.
This,
to
I
the
would
head,
say, is
yeah.
more growth. I don't know if it's so much maturation because he still has a lot of that kind of arrogance. And, even when Obi-Wan and Yoda were trying to warn him on Dagobah, like, look, dude, don't go off rushing to face him. You're not, you're not there yet.
You're right.
So I think that, he had this like false sense of, I don't know, like this confidence that we always joke about. It's like, I don't remember. I think it was like a month. I think they said he was a month on Dagobah, but still, this is almost a Karate Kid thing, right? Where, you train for a summer and you're taking out a black belt. I mean,
Right.
I get it, Japanese master versus some more militant type of, karate style or whatever. Okay, that's what you can do. You can sell the styles, but still, it's experience versus a novice no matter what. And I think that when Luke is going up against him, yeah, we see how much he's grown. He's grown pretty much in some knowledge and in some power and everything like that, but and of course this is something that you and I bring up all the time, right? You can tell because in this duel, Vader's predominantly just using one hand.
Yeah.
Just like messing with them. He's just kind of testing to see where the kid is at.
Right.
Let's see how powerful this kid really is. I don't know why the Emperor wants him so bad anyway.
Yeah.
But by the Return of the Jedi, it's like, no, two-handed. This guy's like,
Yeah.
okay, now he's like...
He means business this
yeah.
time. Yeah.
It's like, all right, just gotten a little bit more powerful. I got to put a little bit more effort into this. So there is that. But
Now, it was funny because I watched something today. I thought it was the coolest thing for me because obviously, I wasn't alive when Empire was released.
That's right.
So, yeah, I wasn't even alive when Return of the Jedi was released, technically.
That's true.
That came out in 83, so I was born the year after.
Yep.
But they actually showed the reaction. Somebody had and I don't know how they got this, how this even happened, but they actually had reaction footage of the audience when Vader, tells Luke that he's his father.
Oh, yeah, people used to sneak in 16 millimeter cameras and crap like that and this stuff. I mean, it was not quite as portable as your phone, but
Yeah, exactly. Got to bring that trench coat out.
Yeah, it was a little, but I mean, it wasn't even. I mean, it was a little bit different even than because it was like film cameras that moved. It wasn't like the old style clunky video cameras either. So it was a little. But yeah, I've seen some of that on YouTube actually.
Yeah, and it was really cool for me because I'm like, I can only imagine what that would have been like. Like you said, how you felt about the cave scene. That moment when he said, no, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Well, he told me no. He told me you killed him. No, and it's like, what? Of course. And then, you guys have to wait, 3 years before the next film comes out. So just even in that whole duel, just unraveled a whole lot of stuff. Because it wasn't just Luke is being tested by Vader, see how powerful he is. He's all right with a lightsaber, terrible with the Force. But then, now let's see what happens when I come at him full throttle. How does he handle that? And not too bad. He still got his hand lopped off, but
he's a Skywalker.
Yeah, exactly. It runs in the family.
It's kind of like branding for them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, all right, let me just get this out of the way now, so you.
Right. So now you have to really ask yourself, okay, without that duel, like I say, you don't get that revelation.
Right.
So again,
no, I mean, arguably that's the most important thing that comes of that. I mean,
right.
Sure. I mean, and that's again, whenever you're looking at this list, and I should actually reread this article to see where Screen Rant was coming from when they put this together, because I would imagine that some of the criteria would include, what's coming out of this. I mean, we're not just talking about the best or flashiest or whatever duels. It's got to have some sort of weight, some sort of plot movement, character development, something in each one of these. And so far it has. And honestly, it hasn't really even been that difficult to figure out. Again, we're just showing these graphics. I mean, people can obviously glean the meaning from it instantly if you're a fan. I mean, if you're not, then you've come to the right place because we're explaining this. But yeah, this is one of those things where definitely the Luke versus Vader duel, the first one in Empire Strikes Back on Cloud City, that really set everything else in motion. You know, just like what we said in the last one with the whole Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon thing. Without that, you might not get a Vader. And, that pretty much set everything after in motion. You could argue that this revelation actually sets the rest in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's cool. Now, here we do get a little bit of a flashy duel, but I would, again, and so far, I don't know. I mean, thinking about this as we've been going along, I don't know. The only thing I would say, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's on this list. I might weigh them differently, maybe, but that's about it. And I don't even know how much differently I would weigh them. Maybe I would put the Luke Vader one a little bit higher than 5, but it came from episode 5, so it fits. Number 4, we have Palpatine versus Yoda. And I think the Palpatine versus Yoda one is besides, obviously, everybody's been wanting to see this since Empire Strikes Back, or certainly since Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Since we actually finally see the Emperor. There was a lot of weight to this because these are the two absolute grandmaster titans of the Force going at it. And I mean, part of the thing is taken away simply because we know how it ends.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one downside to it. But yeah, hands down, this has got to be one of the most important duels in the franchise, I would say.
Yeah, simply like you said, just the masters have to meet.
Yep.
Simply put, the meeting of the masters, and it's like the ultimate good versus the ultimate evil, who wins, and kind of ends in a stalemate, so to speak.
Well, not only that, but I mean, if you want to look at the importance of this is the fight for the chosen one's soul.
Yeah.
If Yoda actually beats the Emperor, then Anakin can then be won back and fulfill his destiny as the chosen one that brings balance to the Force, which in a weird sort of way he does at the end of Return of the Jedi. But obviously, if Palpatine wins, well, he gets his super apprentice, and then the galaxy is terrorized for a while. So there's a lot of stakes involved in that.
True.
Other than that, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's anything really beyond that can be added to that. I'm sure that maybe you guys can think of a million things, but again, I mean, I think that it's not like there's a lot to say to this, but the importance is probably as Spartan as the words that you would use to describe it. It's very important for obvious reasons. Not to cheese out or anything, but
Yeah, it's just some things don't
no,
take a whole lot of explanation.
They really don't, because there's not really. It's not like these two characters had any real emotional connection with each other. I mean, this is really just the ultimate good versus the ultimate evil, the battle for Anakin, the battle for the galaxy. It's a very macro sort of battle. I mean, it's important, but it's a very broad, big picture kind of thing.
Yep.
All right. So number 3 is, of course, another Vader versus Obi-Wan. This is the episode 4 one. And I would definitely say, yeah, I'm good with this. I'm good with this being up there like this, because there's a lot of importance in this one.
Yeah.
Because this one, whereas Palpatine and Yoda were inadvertently fighting for, Anakin, Obi-Wan and Vader unknowingly are fighting for Luke, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, Obi-Wan, this is where we first learn about the Force Ghost thing, and Obi-Wan decides, I don't know if he had always planned this. Still, I mean, with all the books and everything I've read, I still am not 100%. Like, I can say that I I know what I think, but I cannot say with absolute certainty that he had actually planned this all along. One would think that was implied because he learned the technique. Or did it just happen in mid-battle? Like, okay, I'm not really going to be able to beat Vader, like, with this whole, like, lightsaber duel. I got an idea. I know how I can ultimately beat him. And that's why he gives him that whole, if you strike me down, I'll be more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And Vader's probably like, of course. And somebody, by the way, I meant to tell you this. Somebody actually, I think they did like a YouTube video, or I don't know. I saw this somewhere. Maybe it was a parody thing. I don't know. I don't remember. But I saw somewhere somebody actually talked about or did the thing that we always joke about every time, where, you know, when he's like all stepping on the robes and him going back to Palpatine and going, hey, man, a really weird thing happened to me when I was dueling Yobi. Have you ever seen this before?
Right. Exactly. Like, funny thing happened at work today.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I mean, I think I sliced him, but he disappeared. I don't, is that a thing? I mean, is this just something you haven't told me about?
I hit him?
I mean, it's
question mark.
Kind of not sure what's going on. You know, it's all because you can almost picture it, right? Like, he comes back. Oh, well, is Obi-Wan dead? Well, maybe.
I think so.
I don't know. I can tell you he's not here.
Right.
You know, so that's
when you hit him with the Obi-Wan from a certain point of view.
Right. And so I think that that's another thing that makes this particular duel somewhat important too, is, look, this is where we first learn about the whole Force Ghost thing. This is, you know, I mean, there's just like a lot that comes from this, I think. And again, it was basically everybody's older. It's not like they're that much older, right? I mean, the thing that's kind of weird about this timeline is that, you know, Alec Guinness is like 60 years old when he did this movie. And it's probably, I don't know, man. It's probably about maybe 10 years older than what he probably would be at this point in the timeline. Maybe not, though, because there is like 19 years between the two. So, I mean, I guess, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is just the pivotal thing, just because, like you said, Eric, the whole Force Ghost thing, we finally get to see that. 'Cause I remember even as a kid, I was just like, you know, like much like you, I thought that's what a lightsaber does when it hits you, like you just vaporize or something.
Right. I mean, exactly. And that's a good point, actually. This is the first time where we've seen lightsaber connecting with a person, kind of a thing. So
But
that's exactly what I thought. Well, no, I know we know that now, but we didn't know that
right,
then.
Yeah. Right.
Like
exactly.
in 1977, when we're all watching this, it was just, you know, and if you watch it, it just kind of looked, you know,
like it connected. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the little bit that it didn't, I mean, you know, it's kind of movie making back then, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, you just sort of assume that was
Use your
the deal.
imagination.
Yeah, we didn't know that was an intentional thing, and you know, I don't know, maybe it wasn't, because don't forget, one of the reasons why this duel was so slow was that Lucas was saying, "Oh, these lightsabers are like they're like broadswords, they're like super heavy, and you know, all this other stuff." So who knows? Maybe in his mind that was the case. Like, we don't really know how much was retroactively, you know, written for this stuff. But yeah, much like what you were saying, we all thought the same thing. Oh, when a lightsaber comes in contact with you, I guess you vaporize.
Yeah, but this is also where it starts Luke on his path. So
yes,
you know.
Yeah, and that's another important thing. So you have, besides the fight for Luke, starting Luke on his path, the Force Ghost part of it, the two, you know, old once brothers, now enemies, you know, coming back together. Of course, at the time, we assumed that this is the first time they had faced each other since episode 3. And look, on the Obi-Wan series, I thought they did a really good job bridging the duel in episode 3 with this one.
Yeah.
So I think that it did add it didn't take anything away from this duel, in other words. All right, number 2, of course, look.
Oh, yes.
Anakin versus
Gotta
Obi-Wan.
have this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is And again, this is another one that I think even casual fans understand the importance of this. I don't necessarily think that you have to, sit there and just go crazy with exposition with this one because it's obvious.
Yeah.
You have these people now who are on two opposing sides. Anakin feels betrayed by the Jedi, and therefore, he doesn't want to kill Obi-Wan, but it's kind of like, look, man, I mean, if you keep going down this path, I'm going to have to. And in a weird sort of way, Obi-Wan's saying the same thing. He feels betrayed by Anakin, and, he's basically saying, look, you're on the wrong side here, and I don't want to kill you, but if I have to, I'm going to have to.
Do what I must.
Yeah, so, of course, you get this lightsaber duel being interesting also because, look, they're pretty much almost equal at this point. They also know exactly what each other is going to do. They fought, not only did Obi-Wan train Anakin, but they fought side by side in a war for like a decade. So, you
Yeah.
have, this is basically kind of like one of those evenly matched things.
Yeah. I always like to call this broken harmony.
Yeah, it's a good
You
one.
know, it's just when you have harmony that blends very well, and when it's good, and you can hear that harmony, and it's like, man, this is really, really good. And but if someone's slightly out of pitch, or somebody's slightly off, it throws it off, and that's exactly what happened between those two. It's like he got slightly, well, not more than slightly, but he got completely, you know, singing in a different key over here, so to speak. And yeah,
Yeah, well, I
yeah,
mean, and this is, of course, we had known since Lucas did a couple interviews. Either the late 70s, early 80s, I don't remember which, but he was talking about, how Vader became Vader. They fought on a lava planet. Vader fell in, and that's what messed him up. So it was nice that they actually incorporated that. So that
yeah.
was pretty cool. I like that. That was satisfying as a longtime fan to see that. And okay, finally the number one battle is of course the Return of the Jedi, Luke versus Vader. This is, again, we had alluded to this earlier about the importance of this. Now, yes, you could say that Luke has matured. There's a lot at stake because now Luke really has in his head that he wants to redeem his father. And he feels the good in him, he feels the conflict. Vader, of course, is trying to, turn him to the dark side, but you can even see the proverbial cracks in the armor, so to speak, pardon the pun, because even Vader's kind of like, you know, it's sort of like he almost feels like he has to do this,
All right.
and I mean, he had already offered Luke the, like, listen, if you join me together, we can overthrow the Empire, we can do whatever we want. But then, of course, after a while, last ditch effort, that's when Vader throws out the whole, well, if you won't turn, your sister will, because he finds out about Leia, and now Luke goes nuclear, and then basically, of course, after that whole thing, and Palpatine's like frying him, that's when the redemption arc truly hits, and Vader takes out Palpatine to save his son. So I mean, there's like a lot of weight there. I mean, there's just like a
Yeah.
lot, like that whole duel. And I mean, this one, if I'm not mistaken, this one is probably one of the longest lightsaber duels, because if you think about it, it started, like in the final act of the movie, and they kept cutting back and forth, like all this stuff's going
Hmm.
on Endor. It's like, nope, they're still fighting.
Yep. Exactly. No, I mean, it's you see so much. There's so much weight. There's so much on the line here in multiple facets. Like if Luke loses, the Empire definitely wins.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, it's just a crazy set of circumstances for Luke. But I think also for Vader, just even watching his son be seduced or try to be seduced.
Well, I'm sure
You know.
it's remnants, and like he's remembering, because
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure he's pretty much going, oh, great, this is the same load of crap he fed me back then. You know,
exactly.
And after seeing the prequel trilogy, that actually hits you different now. Because
he also
you
knows,
can kind of see it, like,
the whole
here
rule
we
of the
go.
Sith, too.
Oh, yeah.
He also knows the rule of two, so it's just like, okay, if he's making me bring him before him, he's not going to keep both of us.
That's still what made that whole, like, Lego Star Wars, what was that?
Yeah.
Was it the Halloween special? Oh, man. Yeah, it was one of those where, it was the one where, like, you know, they kept popping up in different timelines, and like,
he's like, I want
Kylo
this
guy. Kylo ended up popping up during this, and of course Kylo was unglued, and yeah, the Emperor's like, hey, this guy's awesome. I don't even want either one of you guys. I want this guy. Yeah, that was the best. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he had to have known, like, okay, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's gonna be one or the other, and you know. But yeah, I think this is really good.
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly, in going through this list, I don't even have that much of a problem with where they land in the order.
Not too much,
You know, I mean, like I said, in most, I don't know, there might be a few I might like swap with each other or something, but nothing like crazy, like nothing, you know, I would put the number 10 at like number 3 or something stupid like that, you know. It's like, I mean, I think that again, and look, you could actually just take these 12 and put them all in different orders and still make that work. You know, I think the idea is that these are the ones that are on the list. I mean, I don't, and I'm trying to think in my head if there's any duels that I would have on there, you know, that wouldn't be, or maybe if I expanded it to 15. Because I mean, the thing that I find funny about this, there's not a single sequel trilogy duel on this.
There's a reason for that.
That shows you just how unimportant the sequel trilogy duels and arguably the sequel trilogy is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody cares. And it's true if you think about it, because yeah, you could say the Kylo Rey duel. You know, I would probably put the episode 8 duel a little bit higher, then maybe the episode 9, then maybe 7. You know, stuff like that, right? I mean, you could do that, but the thing is that in the grand scheme of things, those other ones are just way, way more important.
Way superior, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know. But again, you know, this is a time where we leave it to you guys. I mean, it was kind of cool. The chat's got quiet. They must be really into what we're saying because everybody was all about it, and all of a sudden it's like everybody's paying attention. So, hey, look, if you got any value at all out of this, you were entertained for the last hour that you were watching this, hit the like button, feed the algorithm, like the like button so the like button likes us. That's what I always like to say because, you know, for some reason the algorithm will actually put this in front of more people that like it. And of course, if you're getting some value out of all this stuff, also subscribe, hit the notification bell because our schedule does tend to change. We try to hit Sundays at 8 or 9, but, you know, our jobs are a little crazy and hectic, so sometimes that can preclude us from doing a live show that day, and we have to move it. So hitting the notification bell definitely helps. All right, so other than that, let us know in the comments section what you guys thought of this list. Is there anything that you would change? Is there anything you would add or take away? You know, maybe you would change the order. I don't know. Let us know in the comments section, and maybe we'll do the whole. What was the thing that we were talking about earlier that we might do a show on? I mean, obviously we could do one on the Kathleen Kennedy. There was something else we're talking about. We're like, yeah, we should make that next week's show, and I've already forgotten it.
Well, you just always go back and watch the beginning.
I can always go back and watch the beginning again, right? It'll actually give us more views if I do that. All right, well, again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you on the next one. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.